There we go. Fix that. All right. And we're live on Facebook as well. Cool. All right, guys. So today's topic is, are you missing the signs that you're operating in survival mode? And today we're going to go through signs and things that you can do to be able to identify if you, your business, are operating in survival mode and how to shift through that. So, hey, Joras, welcome. Um, all right, so if this is your first time joining me, my name is Tina. I'm a happiness coach and I help business owners deal with the emotional side of business. And I do this by sharing my own personal experience, strength, and hope. I have a trauma informed approach and I also have a background in change management from transport and logistics. So I share live, real experiences so that you guys can actually take something away from this and apply it to your own life. Now, this stuff will apply both personal level and professional level. And even if you yourself have not experienced trauma, I can promise somebody on your team or one of your customers or one of your vendors or your suppliers probably has. And being aware of the emotions and how to navigate those is going to be key to success at being able to make sure that these early warning signs and survival mode is being caught and addressed as soon as possible. Because when we think of it, think of a business operating in survival mode. When we think of that, and how good is it if a business is running in survival mode? It's not very good. If a business doesn't have some sort of buffer, if they can't take a hit, or if they're one hit away from being knocked out of the game, then that is operating in survival mode. And being able to understand what it is and what it looks like and how you guys get to this point is important at being able to solve these challenges. So the first thing that we have to take a look at is, what does your survival mode look like? Right? So if it's in your, sorry, I'm just adjusting it here. So on Facebook, they can see it as well. No, that's not working either. These camera angles are wonky. There we go. What does your survival mode look like? So both personally and professionally, you need to be able to understand what your baseline is, where you're at when things are well, and then where are you at when things are, when you're under the gun and you're kind of in that survival mode. You're racing, you're not really planning, you don't have a lot of structure, you're just kind of doing what you need to do to get through the day. Maybe this is because you had a bunch of your team call in sick, or you've got people on vacation. You haven't hired that new person. You're in the middle of this. There's always something going on in the business. And one of the challenges that can end up happening is we put in temporary fixes in order to get us through, right? I'm just going to do this thing. And then what ends up happening is that does alleviate whatever immediate pressures you were having, immediate problems that you were having. But the problem is that we don't go back and reassess, and we just continue on, and that band-aid solution ends up becoming an ongoing process. And this happens in our personal lives as well, right? Maybe we're just like, you know what, I've had such a stressful day, I'm just going to have a drink. And you have a drink and that helps, and you calm down and you relax and you forget your problems. And guess what? Tomorrow is also a stressful day. And so you come back and you're like, hey, well, that worked last time, let me do it again. And so you end up, whatever band-aid solution that you put in place ends up becoming the problem instead of the solution. So this is how we end up causing our own problems. And this happens even within business. I've seen so many times that businesses or departments will put in a quick fix to deal with something, and they're like, okay, we're gonna we're gonna just work overtime, and we're gonna get this stuff cleaned up, and then we should be all caught up, and then it'll be all steady, right? You'll just continue on, and you shouldn't be able to need to do the overtime. But then something else happens, and you're doing overtime again, and you're doing overtime again, and next thing you know, your team has been going months, and they're working 6 or 7 days a week, every week, week on week. And then you start having other additional problems because of that. You might have problems like increased errors. You could have problems of increased fighting, increased conflict, decreased customer service, right? So in our own personal life, we can have other challenges. Maybe we start arguing with our family when we come home, that we're just tired. We don't have the bandwidth to pour back into them. We have nothing left in the tank by the time we get home. And it starts causing problems that way. So the first step is identifying, what does survival mode look like for you, both personally and professionally. So does survival mode, if we're talking personal, does it mean you've gone back to your vices, whether that's like you're snacking more, you're not eating healthy foods, or you're not eating at all, you're eating too much, too little. It's usually one of the sides of the scales ends up tipping. You are not as balanced, so you're either anxious, or you're depressed, or you are overeating or undereating. You are being too emotional or not emotional enough, right? So you end up having a grape a day. Oh man, those carbs will kill you, man. Those carbs will kill you. So you want to be able to understand, what does your own personal survival mode look like, right? We need to at least identify that, so that we can recognize, oh shit, I'm back in survival mode again. I'm not sleeping properly. I'm not working out. I'm not eating properly. I'm doing all these things. I'm getting irritable. I'm unreasonable. I don't give a flying F about what people think, or, you have all of these different signs that you might have slipped back into survival mode. Being able to recognize them and kind of go, oh, shoot, I'm back here again. Now I know I need to step back, because you do not. Operating in a survival mode is fine for a short period of time, but if it is an ongoing thing, that is where it becomes a problem, right? So this is especially important in business, right? Because if you're running your business in survival mode, it just takes one new competitor to come in and knock you out of the game. So don't always be running on survival mode. Make sure that you're aware of what it looks like, and what are the boundaries and structures around this process, right? And I'm thinking of this, wrote a note just to remind myself to talk about this particular story. So when I was in a business environment, and I had this one particular manager, he was phenomenal in a crisis. Amazing. He would jump to save the day. He was the hero. He would jump in. He'd get all the stuff done, work all kinds of hours, do all this kind of stuff. And that was great. Got us out of a tight spot. Amazing. He was not so good at being able to do any kind of preventative measures, some pre-planning, making sure that we had things in place to prevent this kind of thing from happening again. And that in and of itself is a trauma response, okay? And what do I mean by that? That's usually coming from some sort of unhealed, undealt with previous challenges that are coming back up. So it is an operating in survival mode. It means you don't do anything. And if you're used to living in that crisis environment all the time, So whether that was from when you grew up or whether that was a previous work environment, if you're always in crisis mode, then what happens is you will end up defaulting to saving all of your energy, conserving all of your energy, not expending it and holding it back until things hit a critical level. And then you jump in, put on your cape, and clean up the mess, and then you step back again. And so, what this does is it creates this roller coaster effect in the business rather than having a steady, predictable increase in revenue, right? So you want to have that rather than high highs and low lows. And the faster that you're able to stabilize that, the stronger and more healthy your business is going to be. Same thing with our personal lives. If we're in a constant state of drama, we're always fighting, there's always issues going on, sooner or later, that living in that survival mode, always being constantly triggered with high emotions or low emotions, um, you're going to end up having to pay that emotional credit card bill. So being aware of what are those signs of, oh shoot, I'm in this survival mode, and being able to look at those things and go back and figure out where is this stemming from is important. Okay, so the next question that you want to ask to make sure you're not running your business or your life in survival mode is, how long have I been operating this way? So we want to be able to identify if we are in survival mode. So in the business example of like, okay, we are going to have to come in, we're going to have to, everybody do overtime, we're going to get everything cleaned up. And that's fine. It's like we're going to be doing this for the next 3 weeks, 4 weeks, whatever it is, to get that stuff cleaned up. And then afterwards, we can reset and go back to baseline. But if you haven't identified what does baseline look like and what does survival mode look like, then you're going to have a tougher time with this. So make sure that you go through that first step and identifying what does survival mode look like for your personal life and your business life. And then understand that short-term fixes are necessary and they require, fast action, fast thinking, and being on our feet and reacting in a way that gets us through those tough times, right? So you and I remember this one time, a bunch of us, we were at a company potluck, and it was a Valentine's Day potluck. Well, something happened and we all got food poisoning. Like, it was bad. Like, I had not been so sick in all my life, and it was really, really challenging. And more than half of the office ended up calling in sick on Monday. And so that was definitely a crisis mode. And so we had to kind of get through that, and you do what you have to do. But that's a short term situation, and that now if that is happening on an ongoing basis, sooner or later you got to look at, maybe we should probably try and figure out what the root cause of this problem is and put some sort of corrective action into place to prevent these things from happening again. Because if you're operating in constant survival mode in your business, you're basically being lazy. You're not wanting to do the hard work to figure out, why are we constantly in this fight or flight mode? And maybe it's just because you're used to it and you think that's the way your business is supposed to be run. And that, maybe you're like that manager that I talked about, where unless things are in crisis mode, he doesn't step up to the plate. And he only steps in when things get critical levels. So if that's the way that you operate and that's how you run the business, then you're always going to be needing it to be in crisis mode so that you can step up to the plate. If you're not comfortable with steady and boring, then your business is always going to be a roller coaster ride. And there are consequences for that, because a lot of the times the people that you employ, they don't enjoy that roller coaster ride, especially if they're a little bit more of the steady. They're not the entrepreneur type. They're the ones that want to come in and have some sort of predictability, some sort of safety, some sort of understanding, right? If they wanted that roller coaster, they'd probably be running their own businesses, right? So keep that in mind, that when you're running your business, that the emotional needs of the people that you have on your team are just as important. Okay, so you don't, if you have to put in a short-term fix, make sure that you identify what kind of timeline that you're going to be running this in, and make that clear and understand, so that you have a beginning, a middle, and an end. And you might be like, well, that's all well and good, Tina. um, we started out that way, we had that good intention, but then something else came up, and then something else came up, and then you just continue down that cycle, that it's always in this fight or flight kind of mode that you're operating in. So you want to make sure that you take that step back, you take that hit short term, so that you can actually take the time, get the objective ability to look at what is the root cause of this problem, where is this coming from, why are we constantly operating in this way, and what can we do about this, and then putting in some sort of corrective action, so that you don't end up creating like this cycle of addiction of quick fixes, and never really getting to the root cause, because eventually that's going to catch up to you as well, and then you're going to have to hire in some big um, consultation companies, and they're going to help you go through this change process. And it's usually having to rip off a bunch of band-aids that were put in place, that were cobbled together just to get you to survive, right? So you want to identify that. Oh, aren't you just charming, Dylan? You can spell. I'm so happy for you. Good for you. Did you just learn that today? That's amazing. Do you feel better? Do you feel better? Aw, that's great. That is amazing, Dylan. Can everybody see in the chat what Dylan has done and what he's been able to spell? Let's see. Cunt. Oh, that's beautiful. You're awesome, Dylan. Have an amazing night. Wow, some people, eh? All right. So, the next thing that you want to go through is, what are the early warning signs that operating in survival mode is becoming a problem? So when we identify what this is, what does it look like, then we can start putting in systems to prevent those kind of things from happening. So we might see an increase in overtime cost. We might see your team is exhausted because they've been running on this overtime for more than 6 weeks now. You might see an increase in errors, in mistakes happening, and that starts costing your business in certain ways. You might see increased conflict between the team, between the customers, like in dealing with the customers, in dealing with the vendors or suppliers, right? That it ends up causing unnecessary conflict that didn't need to be in the business, and it's just because we're operating in survival mode. And same thing with our own personal lives, right? If we find that, we're getting irritable and we're getting snippy, we don't have the patience, we don't have the tolerance, we're getting, or we're just completely numb and zoned out, not even present in our life. Those are all survival warning signs, right? That you want to make sure that you are addressing sooner rather than later. Otherwise, it becomes a more costly problem to deal with in the long run. Maybe you don't notice it until your family falls apart. Maybe you don't notice it until your business falls apart, or that, some key people from your team end up leaving, and you're just like, damn, I really liked working with them and I can't believe they left. And now you have additional trauma that you have to deal with, because now you're hurt by that. And you have some sort of betrayal that ends up happening because of it. Okay, so identifying the early warning signs is a good component. It's like, oh, I'm starting to because you have to know what is your default setting. Like, when you're in this good happy mode, I don't know about you, but I know for myself, when I am happy, I am much more productive. I am much more willing to put in extra work. I am able to operate better, and I am much more creative with my solutions, and I'm not just doing the bare minimum coasting by, right? But when I'm in that survival mode, my focus is much more narrowed. I'm not able to see solutions as easily if I am in a happier state. When I'm in a happier state, it's usually because I'm well rested, I'm well nourished, I'm, well hydrated, I'm drinking enough water, I'm doing all those things, right? And my own personal responses, I don't know about you guys, but when I am in that happy state, I am much more accommodating, collaborative, teamwork oriented, and that kind of stuff. When you are running in survival mode, it ends up being every man for himself kind of thing. You start kind of defaulting back, and it's a bit more of a fu kind of energy, and it's like, I gotta do what I gotta do, and I don't care about your deadline. I'm already pressed for time over here, and I gotta do this, so I don't care what problem this is causing for you. And just that little emotional change within your business is going to start causing problems that you can't really measure or quantify until it gets up to that crisis point. So, being able to identify, hey, what are the early warning signs? Because when my team is in a good spot, when they are feeling well rested, they're feeling good, they are on top of their game. They know their stuff. I don't have to worry about them, all that kind of stuff. But if you have all of this drama going on and there's these problems, and then it's just one headache after another, taking that time to identify what are those signs, recognize them, and then the next step is to be able to put systems. What systems need to be put in place to prevent this from becoming a problem? So if you've implemented a short-term fix because you are in survival mode and that is something that is required to get you through this hump, make sure that when you get over that hump, that you take that break, that you take that rest, that you reassess. Okay, we had to do this because of these things, but why did we get in this situation? Why did we have to have 5 of the team members doing this additional overtime for the last 6 weeks, right? We don't want to be constantly running on that kind of stuff. And looking at the long-term costs of what that does for the business. If you have, it's like, do you really need to be running 6 months on 5 people of overtime, or do you need to add in an additional body to be able to cope with the challenges that are coming up with the business? Or is there something that needs to be solved within the business because those challenges really shouldn't be there, and maybe it's a matter of reinforcing or tightening a process, any of those kind of things, right? Of what is it that we need to have in place to prevent these things becoming uh, an ongoing process instead of a temporary survival mode process. So understanding the difference between the two, and then recognizing that, and then putting systems in place to prevent that from happening again, is the key to identifying the root cause and the corrective action of whatever the challenges are. And we can do this in our own personal lives as well, right? It's like, okay, maybe we have a big event or party or something like that we're planning, and so we had to take on all of these additional things, and then once that is done, then we have to take that step back and kind of reassess. It's like, okay, why were we in that crisis mode? Or why did we get to that point? It's like, oh, you know what, we ended up having this big fight because I hadn't been sleeping, I had been doing too much at work, and I was, so one bleeds over into the other, right? So your work life can affect your personal life, and your personal life can affect your work life. And I know everybody likes to say you just keep them separate, but we're all human beings, and one does affect the other. And yes, we can compartmentalize for short term, but eventually we have to address what is the real problem here, and then figuring out what it is that we need to do. Now the good thing is that if these survival mode things come up, then they are actually a blessing in disguise, because they are identifying underlying issues that have been going on either in the business or in our personal lives that need to be addressed, and that these crises come up because we're ready to deal with them. Ready or not, and although it doesn't feel like that at times, ready or not, we do have to deal with it. And when that does happen, then we can go back and we can kind of go, okay, where did this come from? Why am I in this state? What's going on here? And what do I need to do to change that? What system do I need to put in place? What do I need to do differently? And a lot of times it's not adding more things on our plate, it's removing some things and saying, okay, I need to stop these things in order to get these things, because we're saying yes to the wrong things and no to the wrong things. So making sure that we reassess and align and understand what those things are, and making the necessary changes to get us back on track, creating that safe, stable environment rather than that ongoing survival mode roller coaster ride, right? So guys, this is the training for today. I hope you found that helpful. And if you jumped in a little bit late, you can watch the replay on my YouTube channel, which is Coach Tina B 125. Go to the channel, click the subscribe button, and you will get notified when I've uploaded the replay of the live training. And make sure that if you're on Facebook or if you're on TikTok, that you are following me so that you get notified when I go live, because the times are a little bit inconsistent right now with some of the other things that I have on the go. So guys, hopefully that was helpful. I think that this is a good thing to be able to ask ourselves of what does our survival mode look like, so that we're not missing the signs. We also want to be able to define how long are we willing to operate in that survival mode before it starts to become a problem. Recognizing, well, what are the signs that it's becoming a problem to operate this way? And so that we don't get stuck into that this is just normal, right? Because there are consequences for that. And then what systems do we need to put in place? When we see these warning signs, what are the things that we're going to do to actually turn that around before it becomes a big problem? And we do this both in our personal life and in our professional life, with however we're coping in those survival mode times. Okay, so guys, with that, I'm going to wrap it up. Have a great night, and we will see you again tomorrow. Bye.